Welcome to Audiobook, YouTube channel and Facebook page. Subscribe our channel and follow our page.
Audiobook present. How to Talk Anyone. Part 2. 6 to 15 chapter. Let's start.
Technique number 6. Hello, old friend. When meeting someone, imagine he or she is an old friend, an old customer, an old beloved, or someone else you had great affection for. How sad the vicissitudes of life tore you two asunder. But holy mackerel, now the party, the meeting, the convention, has reunited you with your long-lost old friend. The joyful experience starts a remarkable chain reaction in your body, from the subconscious softening of your eyebrows to the positioning of your toes, and everything between. In my seminars, I first have people introduce themselves to another participant before they've learned the hello old friend technique. The group chats as though at a pleasant semi-formal gathering. Later I ask them to introduce themselves to another stranger, imagining they are old friends. The difference is extraordinary. When they're using hello old friend, the room comes alive. The atmosphere is charged with good feeling. The air sparkles with happier, high-energy people. They are standing closer, laughing more sincerely, and reaching out to one another. I feel like I'm attending a terrific bash that's been going on for hours. Not a word need be spoken. The hello old friend technique even supersedes language. Whenever you're traveling in countries where you don't speak the native tongue, be sure to use it. If you find yourself with a group of people who are all speaking a language unknown to you, just imagine them to be a group of your old friends. Everything is fine except they momentarily forgot how to speak English. In spite of the fact you won't understand a word, your whole body still responds with congeniality and acceptance. I've used the hello old friend technique while traveling in Europe. Sometimes my English-speaking friends who live there tell me their European colleagues say I am the friendliest American they've ever met. Yet we'd never spoken a word between us. A self-fulfilling prophecy. An added benefit to the hello old friend technique is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you act as though you like someone, you start to really like them. An Adelphi University study called, appropriately, Believing Another Likes or Dislikes You, Behaviors Making the Beliefs Come True, proved it. Researchers told volunteers to treat unsuspecting subjects as though they like them. When surveyed later, the results showed the volunteers wound up genuinely liking the subjects. The unsuspecting subjects were also surveyed. These respondents expressed much higher respect and affection for the volunteers who pretended they liked them. What it boils down to is love begets love, like begets like, respect begets respect. Use the hello old friend technique, and you will soon have many new old friends who wind up genuinely liking you. You now have all the basics to come across to everyone you meet as a somebody, a friendly somebody. But your job isn't over yet. In addition to being liked, you want to appear credible, intelligent, and sure of yourself. Each of the next 3 techniques accomplishes one of those goals. 7. How to come across as 100% credible to everyone. My friend Helen is a highly respected headhunter. She makes terrific hires for her clients, and I once asked her the secret of her success. Helen replied, "Probably because I can almost always tell when an applicant is lying." "How can you tell?" She said, "Well, just last week I was interviewing a young woman for a position as marketing director for a small firm. Throughout the interview, the applicant had been sitting with her left leg crossed over her right. Her hands were comfortably resting in her lap, and she was looking directly at me. I asked her salary. Without swerving her eyes from mine, she told me. I asked if she enjoyed her work. Still looking directly at me, she said yes. Then I asked her why she left her previous job. At that point, her eyes fleetingly darted away before regaining eye contact with me. Helen continued. Then, while answering my question, she shifted in her seat and crossed her right leg over her left. At one point, she put her hands up to her mouth. Helen said, "That's all I needed." With her words, she was telling me she felt her growth opportunities were limited at her previous firm. But her body told me she was not being entirely forthright. Helen went on to explain the young woman's fidgeting alone wouldn't prove she was lying. Nevertheless, it was enough, she said, that she wanted to pursue the subject further. So I tested it, Helen explained. I changed the subject and went back to more neutral territory. I asked her about her goals for the future. Again, the girl stopped fidgeting. She folded her hands in her lap as she told me how she'd always wanted to work in a small company in order to have hands-on experience with more than one project. Then I repeated my earlier question. I asked again if it was only the lack of growth opportunity that made her leave her previous position. Sure enough, once again, the woman shifted in her seat and momentarily broke eye contact. As she continued talking about her last job, she started rubbing her forearm. Helen continued to probe until she finally uncovered the truth. The applicant had been fired because of a nasty disagreement with the marketing director for whom she worked. Human resources professionals who interview applicants and police officers who interrogate suspected criminals are trained to detect lies. They know specifically what signals to look for. The rest of us, although not knowledgeable about specific clues to deceit, have a sixth sense when someone is not telling us the truth. Just recently, a colleague of mine was considering hiring an in-house booking agent. After interviewing one fellow, she said to me, "I don't know. I don't really think he has the success he claims." "You think he's lying to you?" I asked. "Absolutely. And the funny thing is, I can't tell why. He looked right at me. He answered all my questions directly. There was just something that didn't seem right." Employers often feel this way. They have a gut feeling about someone, but they can't put their finger on it. Because of that, many large companies turn to the polygraph, or lie detector, a mechanical apparatus designed to detect if someone is lying. Banks, drugstores, and grocery stores rely heavily on it for pre-employment screening. The FBI, Justice Department, and most police departments have used the polygraph on suspects. Interestingly, the polygraph is not a lie detector at all. All the machine can do is detect fluctuations in our autonomic nervous system, changes in breathing patterns, sweating, flushing, heart rate, blood pressure, and other signs of emotional arousal. So is it accurate? Well, yes, often it is. Why? Because when the average person tells a lie, he or she is emotionally aroused and bodily changes do take place. When that happens, the individual might fidget. Experienced or trained liars, however, can fool the polygraph. Beware of the appearance of lying, even when you're telling the truth. Problems arise for us when we are not lying but are feeling emotional or intimidated by the person with whom we are talking. A young man telling an attractive woman about his business success might shift his weight. A woman talking about her company's track record to an important client could rub her neck. More problems arise out of the atmosphere. A businessman who doesn't feel nervous at all could loosen his collar because the room is hot. A politician giving a speech outdoors could blink excessively because the air is dusty. Even though erroneous, these fidgety movements give the listeners the sense something just isn't right, or a gut feeling that the speaker is lying. Professional communicators, alert to this hazard, consciously squelch any signs anyone could mistake for shiftiness. They fix a constant gaze on the listener. They never put their hands on their faces. They don't massage their arm when it tingles or rub their nose when it itches. They don't loosen their color when it's hot or blink because it's sandy. They don't wipe away tiny perspiration beads in public or shield their eyes from the sun. They suffer because they know fidgeting undermines credibility. Consider the infamous September 25, 1960 televised presidential debate between Richard Milhous Nixon and John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Political pundits speculate Nixon's lack of makeup, his fidgeting, and mopping his brow on camera lost him the election. If you want to come across as an entirely credible somebody, try to squelch all extraneous movement when your communication counts. I call the technique limit the fidget. Technique number 7. Limit the fidget. Whenever your conversation really counts, let your nose itch, your ear tingle, or your foot prickle. Do not fidget, twitch, wiggle, squirm, or scratch. And above all, keep your paws away from your puss. Hand motions near your face, and all fidgeting can give your listener the gut feeling you're fibbing. Now let's tackle intelligence. What, you ask? Can people come across as more intelligent than they really are? Well, did you ever hear of Hans, the counting horse? Hans was considered the most intelligent horse in history, and he used the technique I'm about to suggest. 8. How to read people like you have ESP. Hans, a very clever horse, inspires this next technique. Hans was owned by Herr von Osten, a Berliner, who had trained Hans to do simple arithmetic by tapping his right front hoof. So prodigious was Hans's ability that the horse's fame quickly spread throughout Europe in the early 1900s. He became known as Clever Hans, the counting horse. Herr von Osten taught Hans to do more than just add. Soon the horse could subtract and divide. In time, Clever Hans even mastered the multiplication tables. The horse became quite a phenomenon. Without his owner uttering a single word, Hans could count out the size of his audience, tap the number wearing glasses, or respond to any counting question they asked him. Finally, Hans achieved the ultimate ability that separates man from animal: language. Hans learned the alphabet. By tapping out hoofbeats for each letter, he answered any question about anything humans had read in a newspaper or heard on the radio. He could even answer common questions about history, geography, and human biology. Hans made headlines and was the main topic of discussion at dinner parties throughout Europe. The human horse quickly attracted the attention of scientists, psychology professors, veterinarians, even cavalry officers. Naturally, they were skeptical, so they established an official commission to decide whether the horse was a case of clever trickery or equine genius. Whatever their suspicions, it was obvious to all Hans was a very smart horse. Compared to other horses, Hans was a somebody. Cut to today. Why is it when you talk with certain individuals, you just know they are smarter than other people, that they are a somebody? Often they're not discussing highfalutin subjects or using $2 words. Nevertheless, everybody knows. People say, "She's smart as a whip. He doesn't miss a trick. She picks up on everything. He's got the right stuff. She's got horse sense." Which brings us back to Hans. The day of the big test arrived. Everyone was convinced it must be a trick orchestrated by Herr von Osten, Hans's owner. It was standing room only in the auditorium filled with scientists, reporters, clairvoyants, psychics, and horse lovers who eagerly awaited the answer. The canny commission members were confident this was the day they would expose Hans as chicanery, because they too had a trick up their sleeves. They were going to bar von Osten from the hall and put his horse to the test all alone. When the crowd was assembled, they told von Osten he must leave the auditorium. The surprised owner departed, and Hans was stranded in an auditorium with a suspicious and anxious audience. The confident commission leader asked Hans the first mathematical question. He tapped out the right answer. A second. He got it right. Then a third. Then the language questions followed. He got them all right. The commission was befuddled. The critics were silenced. However, the public wasn't. With a great outcry, they insisted on a new commission. The world waited while, once again, the authorities gathered scientists, professors, veterinarians, cavalry officers, and reporters from around the world. Only after this second commission put Hans to the test did the truth about the clever horse come out. Commission number 2 started the enquiry perfunctorily with a simple addition problem. This time, however, instead of asking the question out loud for all to hear, one researcher whispered a number in Hans's ear, and a second researcher whispered another. Everyone expected Hans to quickly tap out the sum. But Hans remained dumb. Aha! The researchers revealed the truth to the waiting world. Can you guess what that was? Here's a hint. When the audience or researcher knew the answer, Hans did too. Now can you guess? People gave off very subtle body language signals the moment Hans's hoof gave the right number of taps. When Hans started tapping the answer to a question, the audience would show subtle signs of tension. Then, when Hans reached the right number, they responded by an expulsion of breath or a slight relaxation of muscles. Van Osten had trained Hans to stop tapping at that point and therefore appear to give the right answer. Hans was using the technique I call Hans's horse sense. He watched his audience's reactions very carefully and planned his responses accordingly. If a horse can do it, so can you. Have you ever been watching TV when the phone rings? Someone asks you to hit the mute button on the television so they can talk. Because there's no sound now, you watch the TV action more carefully. You see performers smiling, scowling, smirking, squinting, and scores of other expressions. You don't miss a bit of the story because just from their expressions you can tell what they're thinking. Hans's horse sense is just that. Watching people, seeing how they're reacting, and then making your moves accordingly. Even while you're talking, keep your eyes on your listeners and watch how they're responding to what you're saying. Don't miss a trick. Are they smiling? Are they nodding? Are their palms up? They like what they're hearing. Are they frowning? Are they looking away? Are their knuckles clenched? Maybe they don't. Are they rubbing their necks? Are they stepping back? Are their feet pointing toward the door? Maybe they want to get away. You don't need a complete course in body language here. Already your life's experience has given you a good grounding in that. Most people know if their conversation partners step back or look away, they're not interested in what you're saying. When they think you're a pain in the neck, they rub theirs. When they feel superior to you, they steeple their hands. We'll explore more body language specifics in technique number 77, eyeball selling. For the moment, all you need to do is tune to the silent channel being broadcast by the speaker. Technique number 8, Hans's horse sense. Make it a habit to get on a dual track while talking. Express yourself, but keep a keen eye on how your listener is reacting to what you're saying. Then plan your moves accordingly. If a horse can do it, so can a human. People will say you pick up on everything. You never miss a trick. You've got horse sense. You now have 8 techniques to help you come across as a confident, credible, and charismatic person who makes everyone he or she comes in contact with feel like a million. Let's explore one last technique in this section to put it all together and make sure you don't miss a beat. 9. How to make sure you don't miss a single beat. You've seen professional skiing on television? The athlete at the top of the piste, every muscle primed and poised, waiting for the gun to propel him to ultimate victory. Look deeply into his eyes and you'll see he is having an out-of-body experience. In his mind's eye, the skier is swooshing down the slope, zapping back and forth between the poles, and sliding across the finish line in faster time than the world thought possible. The athlete is visualizing. All athletes do it. Divers, runners, jumpers, javelin throwers, lugers, swimmers, skaters, acrobats. They visualize their magic before performing it. They see their own bodies bending, twisting, flipping, or flying through the air. They hear the sound of the wind, the splash in the water, the whir of the javelin, the thud of its landing. They smell the grass, the cement, the pool, the dust. Before they move a muscle, professional athletes watch the whole movie, which of course ends in their own victory. Sports psychologists tell us visualization is not just for top-level competitive athletes. Studies show mental rehearsal helps weekend athletes sharpen their golf, their tennis, their running, whatever their favorite activity. Experts agree if you see the pictures, hear the sounds, and feel the movements of your body in your mind before you do the activity, the effect is powerful. 26 miles on my mattress. Psychological mumbo-jumbo? Absolutely not. My friend Richard runs marathons. Once, several years ago, a scant 3 weeks before the big New York marathon, an out-of-control car crashed into Richard's and he was taken to the hospital. He was not badly injured. Nevertheless, his friends felt sorry for him because being laid up 2 weeks in bed would naturally knock him out of the big event. What a surprise when, on that crisp November marathon morning in Central Park, Richard showed up in his little shorts and big running shoes. "Richard, are you crazy? You're in no shape to run. You've been in bed these past few weeks," we all cried out. "My body may have been in bed," he replied, "but I've been running." "What?" we asked in unison. "Yep, every day. 26 miles, 385 yards, right there on my mattress." Richard explained that in his imagination he saw himself traversing every step of the course. He saw the sights, heard the sounds, and felt the twitching movements in his muscles. He visualized himself racing in the marathon. Richard didn't do as well as he had the year before, but the miracle is he finished the marathon without injury, without excessive fatigue, thanks to his visualization. It works in just about any endeavor you apply it to, including being a terrific communicator. Visualization works best when you feel totally relaxed. Only when you have a calm state of mind can you get clear, vivid images. Do your visualization in the quiet of your home or car before leaving for the party, the convention, or the big deal meeting. See it all in your mind's eye ahead of time. Technique number 9. Watch the scene before you make the scene. Rehearse being the super somebody you want to be ahead of time. See yourself walking around with hang-by-your-teeth posture, shaking hands, smiling the flooding smile, and making sticky eyes. Hear yourself chatting comfortably with everyone. Feel the pleasure of knowing you are in peak form and everyone is gravitating toward you. Visualize yourself a super somebody. Then it all happens automatically. You now have the skills necessary to get you started on the right foot with any new person in your life. Think of yourself in these first moments like a rocket taking off. When the folks at Cape Kennedy aim a spacecraft for the moon, a mistake in the millionth of a degree at the beginning, when the craft is still on the ground, means missing the moon by thousands of miles. Likewise, a tiny body language blooper at the outset of a relationship may mean you will never make a hit with that person. But with the flooding smile, sticky eyes, epoxy eyes, hang by your teeth, the big baby pivot, hello old friend, limit the fidget, Hans's horse sense, and watch the scene before you make the scene, you'll be right on course to get whatever you eventually want from anybody, be it business, friendship, or love. We now move from the silent world to the spoken word. Part 2. How to know what to say after you say hi. Just as the first glimpse should please their eyes, your first word should delight their ears. Your tongue is a welcome mat embossed with either welcome or go away. To make your conversation partner feel welcome, you must master small talk. Small talk. Can you hear the shudder? Those two little words drive a stake into the hearts of some otherwise fearless and undaunted souls. Invite them to a party where they don't know anyone, and it mainlines queasiness into their veins. If this sounds familiar, take consolation from the fact that the brighter the individual, the more he or she detests small talk. When consulting for Fortune 500 companies, I was astounded. Top executives, completely comfortable making big talk with their boards of directors or addressing their stockholders, confessed they felt like little lost children at parties where the pratter was less than prodigious. Small talk haters take further consolation from the fact that you are in star-studded company. Fear of small talk and stage fright are the same thing. The butterflies you feel in your stomach when you're in a room full of strangers flutter round the tummies of top performers. Pablo Casals complained of lifelong stage fright. Carly Simon curtailed live performances because of it. A friend of mine who worked with Neil Diamond said he insisted the words to Song Sung Blue, a tune he'd been crooning for 40 years, be displayed on his teleprompter, lest fear freeze him into forgetfulness. Is small talk-ophobia curable? Someday, scientists say, communication fears may be treatable with drugs. They're already experimenting with Prozac to change people's personalities, but some fear disastrous side effects. The good news is that when human beings think and genuinely feel certain emotions, like confidence that they have specific techniques to fall back on, the brain manufactures its own antidotes. If fear and distaste of small talk is the disease, knowing solid techniques like the ones we explore in this section is the cure. Incidentally, science is beginning to recognize it's not chance or even upbringing that one person has a belly of butterflies and another doesn't. In our brains, neurons communicate through chemicals called neurotransmitters. Some people have excessive levels of a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine, a chemical cousin of adrenaline. For some children, just walking into a kindergarten room makes them want to run and hide under a table. As a tot, I spent a lot of time under the table. As a preteen in an all-girls boarding school, my legs turned to linguini every time I had to converse with a male. In 8th grade, I once had to invite a boy to our school prom. The entire selection of dancing males lived in the dormitory of our brother's school, and I only knew one resident, Eugene. I had met Eugene at summer camp the year before. Mustering all my courage, I decided to call him. 2 weeks before the dance, I felt the onset of sweaty palms. I put the call off. 1 week before, rapid heartbeats set in. I put the call off. Finally, 3 days before the big bash, breathing became difficult. Time was running out. The critical moment, I rationalized, would be easier if I read from a script. I wrote out the following. Hi, this is Leil. We met at camp last summer, remember? I programmed in a pause where I hoped he would say yes. Well, National Cathedral School's prom is this Saturday night, and I'd like you to be my date. I programmed in another pause where I prayed he'd say yes. On Thursday before the dance, I could no longer delay the inevitable. I picked up the receiver and dialed. Clutching the phone, waiting for Eugene to answer, my eyes followed perspiration droplets rolling down my arm and dripping off my elbow. A small, salty puddle was forming around my feet. Hello? A sexy, deep male voice answered the dorm phone. In faster-than-a-speeding-bullet voice, like a nervous novice telemarketer, I shot out, Hi, this is Leil. We met at camp last summer, remember? Forgetting to pause for his assent, I raced on. Well, National Cathedral School's prom is this Saturday night, and I'd like you to be my date. To my relief and delight, I heard a big, cheerful, Oh, that's great, I'd love to. I exhaled my first normal breath all day. He continued, I'll pick you up at the girls' dorm at 7:30. I'll have a pink carnation for you. Will that go with your dress? And my name is Donnie. Donnie? Donnie? Who said anything about Donnie? Well, Donnie turned out to be the best date I had that decade. Donnie had buck teeth, a head full of tousled red hair, and communication skills that immediately put me at ease. On Saturday night, Donnie greeted me at the door, carnation in hand and grin on face. He joked self-deprecatingly about how he was dying to go to the prom, so, knowing it was a case of mistaken identity, he accepted anyway. He told me he was thrilled when the girl with the lovely voice called, and he took full responsibility for tricking me into an invitation. Donnie made me comfortable and confident as we chatted. First, we made small talk, and then he gradually led me into subjects I was interested in. I flipped over Donnie, and he became my very first boyfriend. Donnie instinctively had the small talk skills that we are now going to fashion into techniques to help you glide through small talk like a hot knife through butter. When you master them, you will be able, like Donnie, to melt the heart of everyone you touch. The goal of How to Talk to Anyone is not, of course, to make you a small talk whiz and stop there. The aim is to make you a dynamic conversationalist and forceful communicator. However, small talk is the first crucial step toward that goal. 10. How to start great small talk. You've been there. You're introduced to someone at a party or business meeting. You shake hands, your eyes meet, and suddenly your entire body of knowledge dries up and thought processes come to a screeching halt. You fish for a topic to fill the awkward silence. Failing, your new contact slips away in the direction of the cheese tray. We want the first words falling from our lips to be sparkling, witty, and insightful. We want our listeners to immediately recognize how riveting we are. I was once at a gathering where everybody was sparkling, witty, insightful, and riveting. It drove me berserk because most of these same everybodies felt they had to prove it in their first 10 words or less. Several years ago, the Mensa organization, a social group of extremely bright individuals who score in the country's top 2% in intelligence, invited me to be a keynote speaker at their annual convention. Their cocktail party was in full swing in the lobby of the hotel as I arrived. After checking in, I hauled my bags through the horde of happy-hour Mensans to the elevator. The doors separated, and I stepped into an elevator packed with partygoers. As we began the journey up to our respective floors, the elevator gave several sleepy jerks. I remarked, in response to the elevator's sluggishness. The elevator seems a little flaky. Suddenly, each elevator occupant, feeling compelled to exhibit his or her 132-plus IQ, pounced forth with a thunderous explanation. "It's obviously got poor rail guide alignment," announced one. "The relay contact is not made up," declared another. Suddenly I felt like a grasshopper trapped in a stereo speaker. I couldn't wait to escape the attack of the mental giants. Afterward, in the solitude of my room, I thought back and reflected that the Mensans' answers were indeed interesting. Why then did I have an adverse reaction? I realized it was too much, too soon. I was tired. Their high energy and intensity jarred my sluggish state. You see, small talk is not about facts or words. It's about music, about melody. Small talk is about putting people at ease. It's about making comforting noises together like cats purring, children humming, or groups chanting. You must first match your listener's mood. Like repeating the note on the music teacher's harmonica, top communicators pick up on their listener's tone of voice and duplicate it. Instead of jumping in with such intensity, the Mensans could have momentarily matched my lethargic mood by saying, "Yes, it is slow, isn't it?" Had they then prefaced their information with, "Have you ever been curious why an elevator is slow?" I would have responded with a sincere, "Yes, I have." After a moment of equalized energy levels, I would have welcomed their explanations about the rail guard alignment or whatever the heck it was, and friendships might have started. I'm sure you've suffered the aggression of a mood mismatch. Have you ever been relaxing when some overexcited, hot-breathed colleague starts pounding you with questions? Or the reverse. You're late, rushing to a meeting, when an associate stops you and starts lazily narrating a long, languorous story. No matter how interesting the tale, you don't want to hear it now. The first step in starting a conversation without strangling it is to match your listener's mood, if only for a sentence or two. When it comes to small talk, think music, not words. Is your listener adagio or allegro? Match that pace. I call it make a mood match. Matching their mood can make or break the sale. Matching customers' moods is crucial for salespeople. Some years ago, I decided to throw a surprise party for my best friend Stella. It was going to be a triple whammy party because she was celebrating 3 events. 1, it was Stella's birthday. 2, she was newly engaged. And 3, Stella had just landed her dream job. She had been my buddy since grade school, and I was floating on air over her birthday engagement congratulations bash. I had heard one of the best French restaurants in town had an attractive back room for parties. About 5 p.m. one afternoon, I wafted happily into the restaurant and found the seated maître d' languidly looking over his reservation book. I began excitedly babbling about Stella's triple whammy celebration and asked to see that fabulous back room I'd heard so much about. Without a smile or moving a muscle, he said, "The room is in the back. You can go see it if you like." Crash! What a party pooper! His morose mood kicked all the party spirit out of me, and I no longer wanted to rent his stupid space. Before I even looked at the room, he lost the rental. I left his restaurant vowing to find a place where the management would at least appear to share the joy of the happy occasion. Every mother knows this instinctively. To quiet a whimpering infant, Mama doesn't just shake her finger and shout, "Quiet down!" No, Mama picks baby up. Mama cries, "Ooh, ooh, oh," sympathetically matching baby's misery for a few moments. Mama then gradually transitions the 2 of them into hush-hush happy sounds. Your listeners are all big babies. Match their mood if you want them to stop crying, start buying, or otherwise come round to your way of thinking. Technique number 10. Make a mood match. Before opening your mouth, take a voice sample of your listener to detect his or her state of mind. Take a psychic photograph of the expression to see if your listener looks buoyant, bored, or blitzed. If you ever want to bring people around to your thoughts, you must match their mood and voice tone, if only for a moment. 11. How to sound like you've got a super personality, no matter what you're saying. Once, while at a party, I spotted a fellow surrounded by a fan club of avid listeners. The chap was smiling, gesticulating, and obviously enthralling his audience. I went over to hearken to this fascinating speaker. I joined his throng of admirers and eavesdropped for a minute or 2. Suddenly, it dawned on me. The fellow was saying the most banal things. His script was dull, dull, dull. But he was delivering his prosaic observations with such passion, and therefore he held the group spellbound. It convinced me that it's not all what you say, it's how you say it. What's a good opening line when I meet people? I am often asked this question, and I give them the same answer a woman who once worked in my office always gave me. Dottie often stayed at her desk to work through lunch. Sometimes, as I was leaving for the sandwich shop, I'd ask her, "Hey, Dottie, what can I bring you back for lunch?" Dottie, trying to be obliging, would say, "Oh, anything is fine with me." "No, Dottie," I wanted to scream. "Tell me what you want. Ham and cheese on rye? Bologna on whole wheat, hold the mayo, peanut butter and jelly with sliced bananas. Be specific. Anything is a hassle. Frustrating though it may be, my answer to the opening line question is anything, because almost anything you say really is okay, as long as it puts people at ease and sounds passionate. How do you put people at ease? By convincing them they are okay and that the two of you are similar. When you do that, you break down walls of fear, suspicion, and mistrust. Why banal makes a bond. Samuel I. Hayakawa was a college president, U.S. Senator, and brilliant linguistic analyst of Japanese origin. He tells us this story that shows the value of, as he says, unoriginal remarks. In early 1943, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, at a time when there were rumors of Japanese spies, Hayakawa had to wait several hours in a railroad station in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. He noticed others waiting in the station were staring at him suspiciously. Because of the war, they were apprehensive about his presence. He later wrote, "One couple with a small child was staring with special uneasiness and whispering to each other." So what did Hayakawa do? He made unoriginal remarks to set them at ease. He said to the husband that it was too bad the train should be late on so cold a night. The man agreed. "I went on," Hayakawa wrote, "to remark that it must be especially difficult to travel with a small child in winter when train schedules were so uncertain." Again the husband agreed. I then asked the child's age and remarked that their child looked very big and strong for his age. Again agreement, this time with a slight smile. The tension was relaxing. After 2 or 3 more exchanges, the man asked Hayakawa, "I hope you don't mind my bringing it up, but you're Japanese, aren't you? Do you think the Japs have any chance of winning this war?" "Well," Hayakawa replied, "your guess is as good as mine. I don't know any more than I read in the papers, but the way I figure it, I don't see how the Japanese, with their lack of coal and steel and oil, can ever beat a powerfully industrialized nation like the United States." Hayakawa went on, "My remark was admittedly neither original nor well-informed. Hundreds of radio commentators were saying much the same thing during those weeks. But just because they were, the remark sounded familiar and was on the right side so that it was easy to agree with." The Wisconsin man agreed at once with what seemed like genuine relief. His next remark was, "Say, I hope your folks aren't over there while the war is going on." "Yes, they are," Hayakawa replied. "My father and mother and 2 young sisters are over there." "Do you ever hear from them?" the man asked. "How can I?" Hayakawa answered. Both the man and his wife looked troubled and sympathetic. "Do you mean you won't be able to see them or hear from them until after the war is over?" There was more to the conversation, but the result was, within 10 minutes they had invited Hayakawa, whom they initially may have suspected was a Japanese spy, to visit them sometime in their city and have dinner in their home. And all because of this brilliant scholar's admittedly common and unoriginal small talk. Top communicators know the most soothing and appropriate first word should be, like Senator Hayakawa's, unoriginal, even banal. But not indifferent. Hayakawa delivered his sentiments with sincerity and passion. Ascent from banality. It is not necessary, of course, to stay with mundane remarks. If you find your company displays cleverness or wit, you match that. The conversation then escalates naturally, compatibly. Don't rush it, or like the Mensons, you seem like you're showing off. The bottom line on your first words is to have the courage of your own triteness. Because remember, people tune in to your tone more than your text. Technique number 11. Prosaic with passion. Worried about your first words? Fear not, because 80% of your listener's impression has nothing to do with your words anyway. Almost anything you say at first is fine. No matter how prosaic the text, an empathetic mood, a positive demeanor, and passionate delivery make you sound exciting. Anything except liverwurst. Back to Dottie, waiting for her sandwich at her desk. Sometimes as I walked out the door, scratching my head, wondering what to bring her, she'd call after me, "Anything except liverwurst, that is." "Thanks, Dottie. That's a little bit of help." Here's my anything except liverwurst on small talk. Anything you say is fine as long as it is not complaining, rude, or unpleasant. If the first words out of your mouth are a complaint, blam, people label you a complainer. Why? Because that complaint is your new acquaintance's 100% sampling of you so far. You could be the happiest Pollyanna ever, but how will they know? If your first comment is a complaint, you're a griper. If your first words are rude, you're a creep. If your first words are unpleasant, you're a stinker. Open and shut. Other than these downers, anything goes. Ask them where they're from, how they know the host of the party, where they bought the lovely suit they're wearing, or hundreds of et ceteras. The trick is to ask your prosaic question with passion to get the other person talking. Still feel a bit shaky on making the approach to strangers? Let's take a quick detour on our road to meaningful communicating. I'll give you 3 quickie techniques to meet people at parties, then 9 more to make small talk not so small. 12. How to make people want to start a conversation with you. Singles proficient at meeting potential sweethearts without the benefit of introduction, in the vernacular, making a pickup, have developed a deliciously devious technique that works equally well for social or corporate networking purposes. The technique requires no exceptional skill on your part, only the courage to sport a simple visual prop called a what's-it. What's a what's-it? A what's-it is anything you wear or carry that is unusual. A unique pin, an interesting purse, a strange tie, or an amusing hat. A what's-it is any object that draws people's attention and inspires them to approach you and ask, what's that? Your what's-it can be as subtle or overt as your personality and the occasion permit. I wear around my neck an outmoded pair of glasses that resembles a double monocle. Often the curious have approached me at a gathering and asked, "What's it?" I explain it's a lorgnette, left to me by my grandmother, which, of course, paves the way to discuss hatred of glasses, aging eyes, love or loss of grandmothers, adoration of antique jewelry, anywhere the inquisitor wants to take it. Perhaps unknowingly, you have fallen prey to this soon-to-be legendary technique. At a gathering, have you ever noticed someone you would like to talk to? Then you've racked your brain to conjure an excuse to make the approach. What a bounty it was to discover that he or she was wearing some weird, wild, or wonderful something you could comment on. The What's-It Way to Love. Your What's-It is a social aid whether you seek business rewards or new romance. My friend Alexander carries Greek worry beads with him wherever he goes. He's not worried. He knows any woman who wants to talk to him will come up and say, "What's that?" Think about it, gentlemen. Suppose you're at a party. An attractive woman spots you across the room. She wants to talk to you, but she's thinking, "Well, mister, you're attractive, but golly, what can I say to you? You just ain't got no what's-it." Be a what's-it seeker, too. Likewise, become proficient in scrutinizing the apparel of those you wish to approach. Why not express interest in the handkerchief in the tycoon's vest pocket, the brooch on the bosom of the rich divorcee, or the school ring on the finger of the CEO whose company you want to work for? The big spender, who you suspect might buy 100 of your widgets, has a tiny golf club lapel pin? Say, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice your attractive lapel pin. Are you a golfer? Me too. What courses have you played? Your business cards and your what's-it are crucial socializing artifacts. Whether you are riding in the elevator, climbing the doorstep, or traversing the path to the party, make sure your what's-it is hanging out for all to see. Technique number 12. Always wear a what's-it. Whenever you go to a gathering, wear or carry something unusual to give people who find you the delightful stranger across the crowded room an excuse to approach. Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice your... What is that? The next quickie technique was originated by doggedly determined politicians who don't let one partygoer escape if they think he or she could be helpful to their campaigns. I call it the who's that technique. 13. How to meet the people you want to meet. Say you have scrutinized the body of the important business contact you want to meet. You've searched in vain from the tip of his cowlick to the toes of his boots. He's not sporting a single what's-it. If you strike out on finding something to comment on, resort to the who's that technique. Like a persistent politician, go to the party giver and say, "That man or woman over there looks interesting. Who is he or she?" Then ask for an introduction. Don't be hesitant. The party giver will be pleased you find one of the guests interesting. If, however, you are loath to pull the party giver away from his or her other guests, you can still perform who's that. This time, don't ask for a formal introduction. Simply pump the party giver for just enough information to launch you. Find out about the stranger's jobs, interests, and hobbies. Suppose the party giver says, "Oh, that's Joe Smith. I'm not sure what his job is, but I know he loves to ski." Aha, you've just been given the icebreaker you need. Now you make a beeline for Joe Smith. "Hi, you're Joe Smith, aren't you? Susan was just telling me what a great skier you are. Where do you ski?" You get the idea. Technique number 13. Who's that? Who's that is the most effective, least used by non-politicians meeting people device ever contrived. Simply ask the party giver to make the introduction or pump for a few facts that you can immediately turn into icebreakers. Now, the third in our little trio of meeting who you want tricks. 14. How to break into a tight crowd. The woman you've decided you must meet is wearing no what's-it? Can't find the host for the who's that technique? To make matters worse, she's deep in conversation with a group of her friends. Seems quite hopeless that you will maneuver a meeting, doesn't it? You can't just say, "Excuse me, I just thought I'd eavesdrop in and say hello." No obstacle blocks the resolute politician, who always has a trick or 10 up his or her sleeve. A politico would resort to the eavesdrop-in technique. Eavesdropping, of course, conjures images of clandestine activities, wiretapping, Watergate break-ins, or spies skulking around in the murky shadows. Eavesdropping has historical precedent with politicians, so in a pinch, it naturally comes to mind. At parties, stand near the group of people you wish to infiltrate. Then wait for a word or two you can use as a wedge to break into the group. "Excuse me, I couldn't help overhearing that you..." and then whatever is relevant here. For example, "I couldn't help overhearing your discussion of Bermuda. I'm going there next month for the first time. Any suggestions?" Now you are in the circle and can direct your comments to your intended. Technique number 14. Eavesdrop in. No what's-it? No host for who's that? No problem. Just sidle up behind the swarm of folks you want to infiltrate and open your ears. Wait for any flimsy excuse and jump in with, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear." Will they be taken aback? Momentarily. Will they get over it? Momentarily. Will you be in the conversation? Absolutely. Let us now hop back on the train that first explored Small Talk City and travel to the land of meaningful communicating. 15. How to make "Where are you from?" sound exciting. You wouldn't dream of going to a party naked, and I hope you wouldn't dream of letting your conversation be exposed naked and defenseless against the two inevitable assaults, "Where are you from?" and "What do you do?" When asked these questions, most people, like clunking a frozen steak on a china platter, drop a brick of frozen geography or baffling job title on the asker's conversational platter. Then they slap on the muzzle. You're at a convention. Everyone you meet will, of course, ask, "And where are you from?" When you give them the short-form naked city answer, "Oh, I'm from Muscatine, Iowa," or Millinocket, Maine, Winnemucca, Nevada, or anywhere they haven't heard of, what can you expect except a blank stare? Even if you're a relatively big city slicker from Denver, Colorado, Detroit, Michigan, or San Diego, California, you'll receive a panicked look from all but American history professors. They're rapidly racking their brains thinking, "What do I say next?" Even the names of world-class burgs like New York, Chicago, Washington, and Los Angeles inspire less than riveting responses. When I tell people I'm from New York City, what are they expected to say? Seen any good muggings lately? Do humanity and yourself a favor. Never ever give just a one-sentence response to the question, "Where are you from?" Give the asker some fuel for his tank, some fodder for his trough. Give the hungry communicator something to conversationally nibble on. All it takes is an extra sentence or two about your city, some interesting fact, some witty observation, to hook the asker into the conversation. Several months ago, a trade association invited me to be its keynote speaker on networking and teaching people to be better conversationalists. Just before my speech, I was introduced to Mrs. Devlin, who was the head of the association. "How do you do?" she asked. "How do you do?" I replied. Then Mrs. Devlin smiled, anxiously awaiting a sample of my stimulating conversational expertise. I asked her where she was from. She plunked a frozen "Columbus, Ohio," and a big expectant grin on my platter. I had to quickly thaw her answer into digestible conversation. My mind thrashed into action. Leil's thought pattern. Gulp. Columbus, Ohio. I've never been there. Criminy, what do I know about Columbus? I know a fellow named Jeff, a successful speaker who lives there. But Columbus is too big to ask if she knows him. And besides, only kids play the "do you know so-and-so" game. My panicked, silent search continued. I think it's named after Christopher Columbus, but I'm not sure, so I better keep my mouth shut on that one. 4 or 5 other possibilities raced through my mind, but I rejected them all as too obvious, too adolescent, or too off the wall. I realized by now that seconds had passed, and Mrs. Devlin was still standing there with a slowly dissipating smile on her face. She was waiting for me, the expert, who within the hour was expected to teach her trade association lessons on scintillating conversation, to spew forth words of wit or wisdom. "Oh, Columbus, gee," I mumbled in desperation, watching her face fall into the worried expression of a patient being asked by the surgeon, knife poised in hand, "Where's your appendix?" I never came up with stimulating conversation on Columbus, but just then, under the knife, I created the following technique for posterity. I call it Never the Naked City. Technique number 15. Never the Naked City. Whenever someone asks you the inevitable, "And where are you from?" never ever unfairly challenge their powers of imagination with a one-word answer. Learn some engaging facts about your hometown that conversational partners can comment on. Then, when they say something clever in response to your bait, they think you're a great conversationalist. Different bait for shrimp or sharks. A fisherman uses different bait to bag bass or bluefish, and you will obviously throw out different conversational bait to snag simple shrimp or sophisticated sharks. Your hook should relate to the type of person you're speaking with. I'm originally from Washington, D.C. If someone at, say, an art gallery asked me where I was from, I might answer Washington, D.C., designed, by the same city planner who designed Paris. This opens the conversational possibilities to the artistry of city planning, Paris, other cities' plans, European travel, and so forth. At a social party of singles, I'd opt for another answer. I'm from Washington, D.C. The reason I left is there were 7 women to every man when I was growing up. Now the conversation can turn to the ecstasy or agony of being single, the perceived lack of desirable men everywhere, or even flirtatious possibilities. In a political group, I'd cast a current fact from the constantly evolving political face of Washington. No need to speculate on the multitude of conversational possibilities that unlocks. Where do you get your conversational bait? Start by phoning the Chamber of Commerce or Historical Society of your town. Search the World Wide Web and click on your town, or open an old-fashioned encyclopedia. All rich sources for future stimulating conversations. Learn some history, geography, business statistics, or perhaps a few fun facts to tickle future friends' funny bones. The Devlin debacle inspired further research. The minute I got home, I called the Columbus Chamber of Commerce and the Historical Society. Say you too are from Columbus, Ohio, and your new acquaintance lays it on you. Where are you from? When you are talking with a business person, your answer could be, I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Many major corporations do their product testing in Columbus because it's so commercially typical. In fact, it's been called the most American city in America. They say if it booms or bombs in Columbus, it booms or bombs nationally. Talking with someone with a German last name? Tell her about Columbus's historic German village with the brick streets and the wonderful 1850s-style little houses. It's bound to inspire stories of the old country. Your conversation partner's surname is Italian. Tell him Genoa, Italy is Columbus's sister city. Talking with an American history buff? Tell him that Columbus was indeed named after Christopher Columbus, and that a replica of the Santa Maria is anchored in the Scioto River. Talking with a student? Tell her about the 5 universities in Columbus. The possibilities continue. You suspect your conversation partner has an artistic bent? Ah, you throw out casually. Columbus is the home of artist George Bellows. Columbusites, prepare some tasty snacks for askers, even if you know nothing about them. Here's a goodie. Tell them you always have to say Columbus, Ohio, because there is also a Columbus, Arkansas, Columbus, Georgia, Columbus, Indiana, Columbus, Kansas, Columbus, Kentucky, Columbus, Mississippi, Columbus, Montana, Columbus, Nebraska, Columbus, New Jersey, Columbus, New Mexico, Columbus, North Carolina, Columbus, North Dakota, Columbus, Pennsylvania, Columbus, Texas, and Columbus, Wisconsin. That spreads the conversational possibilities to 15 other states. Remember, as a quotable notable once said, no man would listen to you talk if he didn't know it was his turn next. A postscript to the hellish experience I had with Columbus. Months later, I mentioned the trauma to my speaker friend from Columbus, Jeff. Jeff explained his house was really in a smaller town just minutes outside Columbus. What town, Jeff? Gehenna, Ohio. Gehenna means hell in Hebrew, he said, and then went on to explain why he thought ancient Hebrew historians were clairvoyant. Thanks, Jeff. I knew you'd never lay a naked city on any of your listeners.